Okay, here we are. Welcome to the fifth. Actually, I think this is the sixth. This is the sixth in the series of Rethinking Education. Very happy to be here. Our goal is really to try to understand how best to learn, both as adults, but also for our kids, in a world that is increasingly putting a premium on creativity, ingenuity, innovation, a world in which a lot of what we can learn, the cost of which and access has gone to near zero. And the companies and the individuals that are really driving the future are the ones that are helping to create it. And so I think, robotics, machine learning, automation, a lot of this is on the minds of, I think, everybody. If it's not, it should be, because it's certainly changing the makeup of what a young person needs to succeed in a world that, my goodness sakes, I mean, we didn't even know we'd be here last year. Imagine how hard it is to try to prepare kids for a world 10, 20, 30 years into the future. So I think it's an incredibly important conversation. My name is Joe McPhail with Wequel Group. And then I'll go ahead and allow myself to catch a breath while I pass it over to Justin Shell. Justin Shell is not only a leader at Wequel Group and a personal friend, but he's also launching a startup through Wequel Startups to help better connect homeschoolers with other local learning opportunities. So we're working with him in a variety of ways because I just can't get enough of him. So Justin, I hope that's a good enough intro for you, and maybe you could help me out here and introduce everybody.
Absolutely. I appreciate the intro, Joe. So I work on a project called My School. Our goal is to make homeschooling easier to do and to provide families the resources to do that. So, a question that comes up not infrequently from a lot of homeschool families is, what are colleges looking for from homeschoolers, and like, how do we approach the admissions process? So, I just reached out to some other members of the homeschooling community. I said, this is something I've been curious about too. Does anybody have any contacts that I might reach out to? And through that avenue, got connected up with Hillary. I'll introduce her in just a minute as well. Lev, I've known Lev for too long. No offense, Lev. I think that's more of a problem for you than me. But Lev was gracious enough to come along as well, and give us a perspective from his college as well. So a little bit more information about Hillary. Hillary serves as the one of the assistant directors of admissions at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. She works with a number of specialized applicant populations, including both transfers and homeschool students, as well as supervising the university's tour guide team. So I think she can provide a lot of perspective, not only on the admissions process there, but also, how to really get to know a university itself. So thanks, Hillary, for joining us. Lev is the director of the Macaulay Honors College at Hunter College in New York City. He was a former Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford and a member of the board of directors for numerous organizations, including the Concord Consortium, Human Rights First, the 21st Century Foundation, and the secretary of the Varma Cooperative Homes. So he's very active in the New York City area there. Just so you guys know, I'm going to be directing questions to each of you. You're more than welcome to jump in at any point to add additional information as we go. And for anybody who doesn't know, in the original announcement for this, Hillary and Lev both provided a couple of points of interest, points of advice for homeschoolers. One of them directly toward homeschoolers, and then one piece of advice that they kind of give to everybody looking at colleges. So I'll reference those throughout some of the questions, and I'll mention what those were in case you didn't catch those.
So I can introduce Michael. I don't know. You may not know Michael. I'm not sure. But I met Michael. Well, I really met him in a park.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to know him a little bit before that, but he used to live nearby. And I was talking to him about what Sume had created with Wequel School and what had happened there. And then when we met, we were talking about some of the work that he does. I'll let himself introduce. I think everybody can have some time to introduce after I give him a warm intro. Um, we met and he connected with Sume around personality types. Know thyself, and I think were you impressed a little bit?
Yeah, I was impressed. She
Okay.
knew a lot. It's good.
So that's a huge part of Wequel School is like helping young people get to know themselves so that they can be comfortable with themselves, so that they're confident enough to be curious. But they connected there, and I was so missing Michael because he didn't call me back for like 2, 3 months. I was like, come on. And then he finally reached out and he was so excited. He was like, we got to do something. And so he was one of the founding members of the series. And so I'm really glad that you could make it. So maybe Michael, you could share a little bit more and we'll just kind of go around the room, make sure we all get a chance to intro.
And I'll be quick, since they probably want to hear from you. But I will say, not just a guy in a park. I have 25 years in higher education, student development, but really around career services. And so really looking at the back end of that, as many students come to higher education looking for the credentials, knowing that they want to get a job on the backside of that. Now, why I wasn't in touch with them, because I was moving jobs and moving physical homes. And I've moved to Vantage Point Consulting, and the work that we do, what I'm working on now is a couple different projects. One is about articulation. So I work a lot with articulation agreements of taking, for example, non-traditional learning or military learners and then translating their practical and on-the-job training into the higher education for credit. And then also most recently working on a return on investment tool that's similar to a net price calculator, and kind of thinking about how and interviewing admissions advisors about that value of a higher education and degree and how you better communicate that, because there's lots of things in the news recently about that, and we're working on some solutions. So that's me. I'll pass it on from there.
Thank you. Well, between the two guests, ladies first. So sorry, Dr. Lev, we're going to go with Hillary. So Hillary, thank you for coming on. Please just kick us off here. Tell us whatever you think we need to hear about you and college admissions for homeschoolers.
Sure. So I think Justin pretty much encapsulated it. But hi, I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that we were able to connect. And I think as everybody in the homeschool community knows, there are no two homeschoolers alike. Everybody's homeschool journey is different. And so I think that is just the biggest piece of advice that I can give to anybody, but in particular homeschooled students and families, is that over communicating what your homeschool experience has been like is going to be key and critical, because Lev and I, as admissions counselors and representatives, we wish we could be mind readers. We wish we could understand everything just at a glance, a quick glance, but you have to help us because we are also human. And so with that, just helping us understand how you've structured your curriculum. Have you been homeschooled your entire educational life and journey, or just high school? Or just earlier today, I read a transcript from a student, or an application from a student who homeschooled all the way up through elementary and middle school, did a traditional charter school for 9th and 10th, and then COVID hit, and the family decided to go back to homeschooling for 11th and 12th. And I just needed that context, right, to understand their journey and their narrative. And so I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I can give to any homeschooling family, is that just over communicating what you have done and how you have chosen to structure your system, or why you choose to homeschool, is going to be helpful in the admissions process, so that we, as your counselors and your advocates, can do a better job with our colleagues and through this process and system.
Well, first of all, Joe, Michael, Justin, thank you for having me here. It's certainly a great treat to be included in this panel, so thank you. And Joe, I was fully prepared for you to say, Lev, don't mess with Texas, so ladies first, but you stuck to the polite side. But I will say, New Yorkers don't back down from a fight, even if it's with Texas, and politely.
So that's with Dr. Lev. Watch out.
Keeping it real. So let me just add on to what Hillary said. I think, look, I oversee the largest public honors college program in the country, and I'm a part of the largest urban university in the United States. And I'm very proud of both of those things. Certainly, New York has a legacy of being biggest, baddest, and all these things. But what we also have been able to accomplish in this setting is a holistic admissions process from top to bottom. And at the same time, we can pay attention to unique characteristics of homeschooled students. And so, just as Hillary pointed out, give us a lot about your experience as a homeschooler, but also reflect on how your experience is unique as compared to all the other more traditional students, if there is, frankly, such a thing. But the bottom line is, do give us your experience and do try going into the conventional sort of more higher education model. So I will just also say this, that in New York, homeschooling happens in many different ways, and I'm sure it's the same is true for the rest of the country and the world. But it is a growing population. It is a growing field, and a growing percentage of our applicants are distinguished homeschoolers who are often taught at home by university faculty. And that is a very different pre-college experience and academic experience in preparing a student for the more or less certified experience coming along. So do give us as much info as you can, and certainly highlight your personal enrichment and unique perspective you would bring to a college community. Because at this point, they're unusual. Tomorrow, as Joe, you alluded to, it could be unusual to see somebody who graduates from a standard school experience. But for now, they need to speak more about their individual pathway and how that individuality will contribute to their being in a more stable and predictable setting.
Yeah, I think your one point of advice that you had given, your general point of advice was, bring forward your genuine self in the context of the place you're applying to. And in all your materials, try to answer the fundamental three questions of why me, why this, and why now. And so I guess from the university's perspective, Lev, what's your overall goal with reading the application? And then why are those three questions so key?
Sure. So the overall goal is to build a community. Look, we just closed out the round of applications for 2022, I guess the freshman class of 2022. And our total number of applications went up 20% from last year. And we thought that was a big jump, but now it's even higher. And so we have to build out of those applicants a class of 120 kids. So it's almost like building out a little team. And the components we look for, and I'm sure it's true for other universities, is you want kids who are driven, kids who are motivated. You want those who are curious and are going beyond the books to apply their knowledge for societal good. That is what we're looking for. And that's why I think it's important to think of those three questions as guiding in answering, frankly, any question that's posed. You alluded to my going to Oxford, and the great saying there is, sometimes it's not the answer that matters, it's the right question that is much more important. And here there are three right questions that are important, which is, why me? Well, they should own their experience. A lot of students are awkward about being homeschooled. They sort of awkward about having a homeschool ball. Everything's kind of weird and they relate to it as something weird. Don't communicate weirdness. Communicate uniqueness and be comfortable with who you are and what you had to offer. Why this? I think it's important to answer that question in any context because it shows how you think of your place in a new setting. And why now being 18 is not good enough or 16 is not good enough. So why now? Well, because, my turn, sure. But ultimately, what's important is that the landscape is changing, that the times are different, and you want to not only enhance your knowledge base, but prepare yourself for the future.
Awesome. Yeah.
That was great. That was, yeah. Okay. So sorry, prepare for the future. I think that's a tough one, right? Like we were talking before we started live streaming about how, there are certain technologies that are transforming the landscape, right? So basically the software revolution has allowed, not all, but a lot of knowledge to become free, freely accessible on demand also, which is part of the reason why the focus on knowledge probably shouldn't be emphasized as much. It's more, how do you use knowledge to create, right? But then you also have basically the things that are routine are easy to automate. The things that are automated are easy to code and to build robotics around to try to essentially alleviate the need for human beings. And human beings don't generally like doing things that involve them acting like robots anyway. And so here we are with this great opportunity. Many people are fearful. A lot of thought leaders are fearful. Some politicians are fearful about this. I'm incredibly excited about this because I see what the kids are doing at Weekly School, and this is what they're doing all day. They're using knowledge to create. That's how they demonstrate. We don't do grades. They create and use their knowledge to do it. But what I'd really like to know is like, how do you know if the skills that they're learning are going to actually be relevant to a world 10, 20, 30 years in the future when we have a hard time seeing, the nose in front of our face?
I'm not sure if that is a direct question or if it's just one for us to ponder, but I think it is.
I can clarify.
Okay.
And I would love for you to answer. So your college, you're like head of college admissions. So you're looking at this, but
Mhm.
college admission means, okay, I'm going to try to select candidates that are best prepared for our program to prepare for the future. So
Mhm.
even though it sounds like it's pie in the sky, hoity-toity, who knows, you still have to decide.
Mhm.
As a parent, you have to decide. As a college admissions associate, you have to decide. And so how do you decide which kid is best prepared for a world 10, 20, 30 years in the future that we don't know about?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's definitely college admissions in general is we're basing our professions and our careers off of the whims and woes of 17 and 18-year-olds. So already it is a precarious world that we live in. And so I think we just prepare, and every institution is going to structure it differently with regards to their institutional priorities and the kind of institution that it is. But Trinity is a liberal arts institution. And so I think liberal arts institutions will fare this journey very, very well because we are looking for students who are going to go on to continue to become critical thinkers, people with empathy who can use their skills and experiences to inform the skills and knowledge that they've acquired throughout high school and college to make the world a better place. Like Lev said, making societal good from their college degree. And so I think from the perspective of the high school family or the homeschooled family and homeschool student perspective, how we can best determine if they're prepared and if this student is ready is, again, going back to that over communication piece, is articulating to us and helping us understand what it is you have gathered and learned. Because even though everybody's journey is going to be different, we cannot ignore the fact that, and Lev, I don't know about you, but Trinity receives applicants from all over the country, from all over the world. And we are trying to create a system that is not just works for us, but it's equitable for the students who are applying from so many different kinds and types of institutions. So we're trying to create this structure that creates some sort of level playing field, right? Of helping us understand as we craft and curate our class of students who we think are going to be able to do the work, be successful and thrive in our environment, but then also be good community members as a residential campus. That's another piece of our application review, is understanding, okay, are you going to be a person who gets involved outside of the classroom, someone who is engaging with clubs and organizations and contributing in those relationship elements of the college going experience. And so I think just being able to articulate and help us understand what it is you have accomplished throughout high school and whatever those words mean to you, because we still look at grades. We still look at transcripts. We still look at test scores if you have them, because those are measures and metrics that help us create some sort of structure. And so we it's not a perfect system. It's definitely room for improvement. And I think that's where, like Lev was saying, that's where the holistic review process really comes into play, is that we are able to work one-on-one with students. So helping us understand what your experience is and how you're going to be able to thrive in our standard environment. Because at the end of the day, you will likely get grades from your college institution. You will likely have tests. You will likely have, if you want to go on to become a lawyer or a doctor, you will still have to sit for the MCAT or the LSAT and go on and pass those standard metrics. So we need to help prepare you for moving into that direction. Lev, is there anything you wanted to touch on there?
So I'm going to take a slightly different perspective here. Joe, first and foremost, I don't know what the future holds. So I can't give you a standard American or investment banking hockey stick type trajectory on if you do this, then in 5 years we'll have blah. No, I can't do that. The only thing I can promise you is that New York and certainly the City University of New York are what America is increasingly looking like day by day. And so if you can operate in a system that is 80% immigrant, that is increasingly diverse, even though we are 80% immigrant, and has a very strong mission-centric component where most of our graduates stay in the city, work in the city, and succeed in a very competitive global environment of New York City. And if you can frankly make it here, you can make it anywhere kind of mentality. I can promise you that the kinds of skills you will gain, whether actively in the classroom or passively just by walking down the street, will serve you well and will give you the kind of advantage you need. And I just have to reflect back on my own experience where, and I'm sure this is also true for Hillary, I don't think there's a single normal child, whether homeschooled or tortured in a normal setting, who is going every day about their everyday life dreaming to becoming a higher education administrator. That simply is not a thing. They just wonder, who the hell are these people and how do they get there? I don't know. And here I am. But, you know, look, when I studied chemistry as an undergraduate. I got my PhD in material science and inorganic chemistry. I loved every moment of it. It taught me a lot of things, including how to approach asking the right questions and trying to get to essentially the truth. And I apply those skills every single day now in a slightly different setting with a more humanistic approach than just trying to grow another crystal. So I would just say you can get the skills you need to be a thinking, functioning individual. What you do with those skills is going to be up to you. But you should be ready to deal in an ever-changing world. And it shouldn't preclude you from being ready to face what you don't even know you're going to face.
I love that. Okay, so, and I know Justin's got a lot of burning questions about specific to admissions. And then Michael, at some point, he's going to chime in here and you guys are going to love it. But I'm going to push back a little bit and say that between the two of you, what you guys just said, I think we do know what children need to succeed 10, 20, 30 years into the future. So the first thing that Hillary mentioned was, we're a liberal arts college, so I think we're going to fare well. And then she went on and she mentioned a few key words: communication, right? The ability to not be fearful of engaging with other people, which also touched on something Dr. Lev said. You need to be creative. You need to be able to work really well and collaborate with other people. You need to know how to use technology so that you can learn whatever you need to learn to get the job done, right? And then to add on to that with what Dr. Lev said, and tell me if I'm missing something here, but Dr. Lev also mentioned that we're in this ever-changing world. We need kids to learn how to be resilient, to learn how to be confident so they don't get crushed or are fearing failure, right? And they can't be ignorant and fearful of folks that don't look like them, right? Or don't act like them, or come from a different background, or have different belief systems, right? So did I about sum that up, or did I miss something here? Okay, great. We can move on to admissions.
Yeah, no, I'm going to kind of just jump from what you guys are saying. And say that one of those things that I pulled out from when you were talking about Hillary was, you know, you are using some of those quantitative metrics to say, okay, do do I think this person is academically capable in order to succeed at the university? So getting a little bit more specific, what are some of those quantitative metrics that you're looking at?
Yeah, so I think, again, every institution is going to be very different with their review process, if they have automatic admission standards, or if they participate in a more holistic, well-rounded review of an applicant. So I can only speak from Trinity's perspective, but for us, and particularly with homeschooled students, I like to see the context in which they've learned. And in particular, I really value when students have learned outside of their family. You can learn from your insular family, but getting a perspective from someone you're not related to, who has supervised you in some sort of setting, does not have to be a traditional class. Maybe it could be you have a part-time job, or you're involved with scouting or service projects or whatever it is, but getting a perspective from an adult you are not related to can speak volumes to your character, the qualities and characteristics that you have and developed over time, and how those are going to translate into a classroom setting. So whether that's through dual credit classes or co-op classes and curriculum, because then that's sort of a twofold experience, in that it also shows us that you have exposed yourself to people different, like what Lev was saying, different from who you are. You've learned how to interact and engage with people who are coming from different backgrounds, perspectives, experiences, different homeschool journeys to get to that point in time. And so for us, that's a nice piece of the puzzle. Not every student does have access to co-ops or dual credit classes. And so then it's just taking into consideration the context of their environment. What did they have access to? How do they articulate it? And homeschool students in particular take me the longest to read, because I often do reach out and do follow-ups, and I have interviews with homeschoolers, because if I can't understand it based off of the materials they provided me, I want to make sure that I have all of my questions answered before I go into an admissions committee. So I am pretty persistent when working with homeschoolers to make sure that I have their timeline correct. I fully understand and grasp what they have used in terms of their curriculum and how they've prepared for that. And then similarly too, in a world, and I think, Justin, you asked us about this, and so I think it's probably going to come up a little bit later, but in a world that is now shifting away from testing, particularly in the United States with regards to SAT or ACT test scores, oftentimes that was one of the biggest metrics of a standardized test that is flawed and biased in its own ways, but a standardized metric for us to understand, okay, is this student ready to do some level of collegiate level coursework? But in swinging away from that, conversations and interviews and communication with your representative, whoever that is, become even more critical. Because if you don't have access to sit for an exam safely, or you have sat for an exam, but you have chosen based on the statistics, right? You have decided, I do not want to go submit my testing. It betters my chances if I apply test optional or test blind or whatever the institution's policy may be. Having a conversation and putting a human element to the pieces of paper that you submit to an institution are going to become much more impactful too. So it's not a one size fits all. And it's definitely not a clear-cut process by any means. It is very much a journey and a walkabout that we go on with each student.
Well, I think, Hillary, this is where you and I part ways. I know. Look, there's like,
wow, we got some controversy. The student, Dr. Lev, your students are going to love this. Is all
Lev is just fine, and my students know that I take the road less traveled more often than I'd like. So maybe it's the highway. I don't know. In any case, so for us, the admissions process is a holistic process, but it depends, I would say, on it's essentially a three-legged stool of independent assessments. I am not convinced that the SAT and the ACT are gone. I am not convinced that we're on this slip away from it. I actually think this is a temporary, very exciting, but very temporary 2-year, maybe 3-year hiatus away from it. The impacts of which will be studied for decades to come, and then eventually somebody out of McKinsey will tell us to do something and everybody will do it. But in any case, for us, we used to have a very standard first step. The very standard first step was we would assess your SAT, we would assess your GPA. Those two things would produce an academic score, which again contributed to your overall admissions score. The second part of it was the living component, which I would call where you were assessed by an independent reader who got a stack of 50 applications, and their job is to look at your 2 essays, your 2 letters of recommendations, your resume, or whatever activities you're submitting, and they produced a score based on whatever rubric we put in front of them. So that was the middle part. The last part of the 3-legged stool was an independent interview conducted last year, of course, over Zoom, but in all the previous years in person, conducted by a current student partnered with an alum or not so recent alum of a 150-year-old institution. So, and they would put in another number and say, yeah, this is what we think. And then my job essentially was to merge spreadsheets, add the numbers, do some Z-scoring to remove bias, and produce a list where only after that, my colleagues and I would sit and review all the various inputs and occasionally make some changes to overrule certain recommendations. But overall, again, last year, we're going SAT blind. Frankly, I disagree with any institution that is going SAT optional. I believe it to be just inherently discriminatory. But the bottom line is we're going 2 years now at SAT blind, so we will be assessing the transcript in 5 separate parts where there's the total GPA, your science GPA, your math GPA, your humanities GPA, and I think and social sciences. Those are the 5 that'll give you 5 points each, and that replaces the academic score. So not only are we looking for excellence overall described in your average GPA, but we're looking for excellence across all the various specifics. Because oddly enough, for CUNY, which is an institution of 300,000 students in one city, the social science GPA is the best predictor of student success, which was a surprise to me when we started looking into it. So that's how we're doing it.
Okay, so before you guys start fighting, let me let me point out that, to be honest, like, I don't actually think, and Hillary, jump in here in a second, but I didn't actually hear a ton of disagreement. I heard one particular point that she made, that you decided to go into detail about how you think differently about the future of that one thing. But I'm guessing that Hillary actually agrees with a lot of what you said. But,
we have a very similar review process. It's all based off of rubrics and structures and skeletons. So yeah.
All right. So I just want to get that clear. But so we get that there's an admissions process, and we're all probably in agreement, as much as Dr. Lev wants to show his students how he's willing to fight. No, no, I love it. But I do think that there is an issue here that's quite contentious, and it probably is the area where maybe you two disagree, and it's really, really important, which is the importance of tests to get into colleges. So yeah, we should definitely talk about that. So maybe Hillary, if you could elaborate a little bit on your thoughts on, you made a point. You were saying that the trend was moving away from testing, and that was a prediction. So maybe you could kind of, and I actually agree with you, but Dr. Lev disagrees with you, and there's lots of opinions. So maybe we can better understand your opinion.
I mean, I think it's just about the structure, right? We are all, I'm the only female identifying person on this call. So take that with a grain of salt as we say this. Higher education in America was built for white men. Standardized testing was built for white men. Everybody who does not fall into that category, therefore, is automatically intrinsically disadvantaged by the historical roots of higher education and testing. So now that we've cleared that up, so with that, I think what's important by my comment of moving away from it, nationally speaking, because the pandemic is still going on, and if you look at international applicants having fewer, even before the pandemic, international high schoolers had fewer and fewer opportunities to test in the SAT or the ACT because of one reason or another, or exam scores got corrupted and, you know, all sorts of things. And so I think it's a combination of all of these different contingency factors that, at least in the United States, in the contiguous United States right now, like Lev said, for the next 2 to 3 years right now, we are on a pendulum swing away from testing. Who knows what that's going to do? Who knows where it's going to come back from? Because inciting structural change at any system, whether it is a higher education system, a testing system, a enforcement system, whatever it is, it takes a really long time, and it takes dedicated people doing the hard work that is not an overnight fix. And so I think this is a prime example of testing, right? We as a community, as a culture, have identified that, yes, there are things that are wrong with the tests, but what have we done to change that? Versus how are we going to, if we feel that that is a critical piece of information for higher education moving forward, how are we going to supplement that information with something else? So I don't know if I have a real answer there, but at least for us as an institution, we are trying to do it as best as we can, right? And we are taking a 3-year stopgap hiatus to see, just like Lev said, to see how we can look at the data of our own students who we have admitted, who then get to campus and see how they've done in their coursework, looking at all of those data points of saying, okay, the social sciences on your students were the best indicator of overall academic success. Similarly, I think social sciences and English, because as a liberal arts institution, regardless of if you're a STEM major or a business student or a fine arts student, you have to be a strong writer. You have to be a strong communicator. So English and social science courses tend to be the best indicators of success for our students. And so looking at the decisions that we made in the application process, who we ended up yielding, who came to campus, and how they've done over 3 years is going to help us figure out what we do when, I don't know if COVID is ever going to be over, but how we pivot and transition into that world moving forward.
Jedi Joe here. Look, I'm going to agree with Hillary in terms of the implicit bias of the SAT. I think the most important part that's happened is basically human laziness ruins everything. The SAT is just a metric. It was meant to be one of a component of metrics. And then over time, it just became like, look, here's a number, and here's a cutoff, and this is what we define as excellence. So thanks, everybody. Apply somewhere else. It's meant to be just a metric. We have a similar problem with GPAs. Most of my students are graduates of New York City public schools, some of which are excellent, some of which are terrible. And we have the most integrated city with the most segregated school system in the country. It's an embarrassment. But the bottom line is, as an educator is trying to predict success, I have to have the tools to distinguish between a 95 from Stuyvesant High School or other selective high schools and a 95 from God knows where. And those tools no longer exist because somebody in our soon to be, thank God, departing mayor decided not to report social promotion rates within those schools, which allowed us to calibrate the GPAs, which is, again, just another metric. It's one of, and we have the luxury of doing that. So I agree with Hillary in the sense that, we're all in institutional hiatus, but I think there's going to come a point, in a very contentious point, probably a year from now, when we do have to decide if we're going to go SAT blind or if we're going to go back to including the SAT in a part of the assessment. What that does for state universities, I would argue the effect is minimal for state universities. What it does for honors programs within the state university, I would argue that it would reduce the number of underrepresented minorities in our applicant pool. And it would also measure our institutional commitment to racial diversity and opportunity. So those are conversations for us to have. For private institutions where I would venture to guess they're attracting more international students, it would potentially close that door, which is finally beginning to reopen to a critical component of their financial models after a 4-year hiatus of impossibility of getting student visas, and a narrative that was not friendly to our international allies. So we all have to we're going to reach that fork in the road fairly quickly. And I would just encourage everyone to push for clarity, because SAT optional is essentially encouraging those who think their score sucks to not report it, and for all those who think it's great to report it. And when you're sitting on the other side of the table and that's the binary you're working from, guess who's going to get in? So basically require the SAT or don't, and then focus on the GPAs and others.
So I guess, since we've talked a little bit about, what those quantitative metrics are and how you guys deal with those, setting that aside, regardless of which direction it goes in the future, and, families that are applying here very soon are saying, okay, whatever colleges they're applying to have those decisions made. So apart from those, from a more qualitative standpoint, what would the ideal application, what information would they submit that would give you that holistic kind of view of them, so that you didn't have to call them back, Hillary? Like, what would the ideal package of information include?
I think no matter what, I'm just a nosy Nelly, and so I will always call people back. But that's just a me problem. So I think including with their transcript, clear. One of the things that I always tell our tour guides is that they are part of an in-group, right? We have a shared language, we have shared abbreviations. I know what APO stands for, but someone who's in an out group does not know what that abbreviation means. So similarly, on your transcript or on your documents, whatever abbreviations are there, please spell them out for me. Make it as clear as day, because I will not know what SSTV means. You need to spell it out for me very, very plainly. So creating that clear glossary of understanding, and also too with the school profile. So it is not anything fancy, but you can look up traditional brick and mortar high schools have school profiles, which help give us context into the environment. Like Lev was saying, the environment from which these students are coming from. How many APs or advanced classes are offered in these brick and mortar schools? How many students do you have? What is the demographic breakdown of your students? Where is your school located? As a homeschool student, you have so much more flexibility with that, because typically it is your family, it is a much smaller unit. So helping us understand through this profile, going back to one of my earlier comments, what kinds of curriculum have you used? Just spell it out for me. You read all of these great works, great. Define which great works you read, because I could define great works as something different than Lev versus somebody at another institution. So just being overly communicative about your transcript, about your profile, the kinds of curriculum that you utilized, or online resources, or AP onlines, dual credits, anything like that. And then because we're a residential campus community, academics obviously are in predicting a student's academic ability to do the work is one of the biggest pieces of our puzzle that we try and decipher. But the next biggest piece is the social involvement. I want to see how you've dedicated your time outside of your studies. What are you passionate about? If that is caring for your family, great. Tell me how you care for your family. Do you have elderly grandparents that need a lot of help going grocery stores or errands around the house? Great. Tell me how you spend your time, because if you don't put it in there, again, I am not a mind reader. I will never know. If you are passionate about crocheting and you want to crochet 1 million baby blankets for babies in the NICU in your local hospital, great, tell me that. But detailing out how you spend your free time in the extracurricular or co-curricular section of an application is really helpful. And then those letters of recommendation, again, getting one from someone who you are not related to, because bias exists and your family members are going to think you're the bee's knees. And I don't doubt that. But I need a somewhat unbiased perspective from someone who supervised you and you're not related to help give me an idea of what you might look like in our classrooms, engaging with our students. So that's sort of like the overall bundle of items that I would need and want. And then of course, I love doing interviews with students. It's really the time for their pieces of paper to pop and become a person behind them in 3D and getting that depth to them. So I would almost always encourage an interview for a homeschooled applicant, regardless of the institution, an interview, an email exchange, a phone call with your assigned counselor, just to help put some identity behind it. Lev, what would your package look like?
So, so again, Hillary, exactly what you've already outlined. But I just want to stress a couple of things. Hillary mentioned that we want your essays to pop. That does not mean that in reading it, I'll be getting anxious about your mental state. Like, do not write about being anxious, how your heart is bubbling and your feet are hurting and you're running and hurtling towards something. Please, God, that is not what you want to read, 400 times. So tell a good story. It can be very, very simple, very slow. That sort of gives me comfort and understanding that you know how to communicate and you know how to capture people's attention and hold it. And so that's number one. Number two, I think Hillary hit on a very important point. There is nothing, again, just like what I tried to stress about being a homeschooler, own your experience. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you babysit, if you take care of grandma. That is a job. And I think we as a society are slow to value this as a job, but it is an important job, especially when you're trusting a teenager with the care of an older person. It's a responsibility for which they will be held to account. And lastly, on the letters of recommendation, get an internal letter of recommendation, whether it's your professor, teacher, tutor, whomever. I agree with Hillary. It should not be for homeschoolers from your parents who are teaching you math. That's not a great letter, but you want a teacher and instructor. But please do not submit 2 letters from a teacher. The likelihood of you asking 2 teachers with whom you've gotten an A is 100%. So they'll say exactly the same thing where, hello, my name is blah, blah, blah. This course covered blah, blah, blah. They received an A, great kid, highly recommend. That's not helpful to see that twice. I mean, I would argue it's not even helpful to see that once because the transcript will tell you that. So if you volunteer in your church, if you volunteer in a community, if you deliver newspapers, ask somebody in the outside world to submit at least one of the required letters, because then it'll tell us a little bit something about you as inside the classroom, which of course is important, and outside of the classroom, which is, I would argue, even more important, because again, in New York, you learn probably more outside of the classroom than in the classroom, and your entire life is a laboratory of what's to come.
Okay, I'm going to jump in for a question here. It's probably fitting into what Justin is seeing in some other questions, and that is, it changes at a certain point in the sense you're going to send out offer letters because these are great students, right? They've done awesome things. And then it really, I think there's 2 things that really matter to students and families, and that is fit. And I could see how do you talk to that homeschool student to say, our school is going to be a good fit for you, and because maybe we're shying away from it automatically from that structured education. And then the second one is value, because they're like, I have all these skills. Why do I suddenly have to take classes and get grades to prove myself to an employer if that's their end job? So how do you get at that value and kind of the fit question when you're specifically speaking to homeschooled students?
I think when I talk with students, regardless of traditional schooling or homeschooling or transfer students, anybody, I always like to boil it down to 3 kinds of fit. You are looking for an academic fit. Does the institution have what you want to study? At the end of the day, will we help you get from point A to point B of what at 17, which again, you do not have to have it all figured out at 17. Your life is very much ahead of you. But at 17, if you already know, and I'll use Trinity as a prime example, if you already know that you want to become a nurse and you want to earn a BSN as quickly as possible or a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Trinity will not most likely be a good fit for you because we don't offer a BSN. So how could we help you get there as quickly as possible if we don't offer that degree path? So understanding and doing a lot of reflective work of what do you want out of your college experience? What do you want? Everybody's journey is different and everybody's reason for going to college is different, and pursuing higher education in every way, shape, and form is unique to them. So what do you as a person want to do with the rest of your life? And again, that's a broad question, but think about, is there a certain career path? Or when you think about when you grow up, right? Well, I want to become X, Y, and Z when I grow up. Will that institution help you get there? And how you can decipher academic fit is doing research on the website or talking again to your admissions counselor. We are great fountains of knowledge. We might not know all things, but we can help you find out most things. And then connecting directly with the faculty or the students. I We have engineering on campus. I am not an engineer. I cannot tell you the specifics of what our engineering degree plan looks like, but you know who can? Our engineering faculty members. Their contact information is available on the website. Email them. And so we can help be facilitators in that academic fit process. The next piece of that is the social fit. When you think about how you enjoy spending your free time, what do you like to do? How do you hang out with friends? How do you build community? How do you relax? Finding an institution that would match up well with you. Trinity is a D3 school. I love our D3 athletic experience, but if you were looking for rah, go team, ESPN Sports Day, like SEC, we will not be that. And so it's just understanding, how do you like to have fun and being, like Lev has been saying, own your truth, own your journey. That is not our journey. So social fit, academic fit, and then the final piece is financial fit. So going back to the value, everybody's financial situation is different and unique to them, and every institution reviews scholarships differently and financial aid awards differently. And so it's working with, once you've identified places that fit those first two fits, academic and social, then it's having that conversation about, okay, here's the sticker price. Here is what the scholarship and financial aid package is going to look like. And then recognizing that no matter where you go to school, you are worth an investment as a student. You are worth time and energy and education in bettering yourself and helping you get prepared for whatever you want your next step in life to be. So you are worth it, but everybody's worth it metric is different. And so as an institution, it should be every institution's goal to try and make their experience as affordable as possible for as many students as possible. But again, affordability is very subjective. It differs family to family, and that's going to be a unique conversation with your whoever is paying for college, whether it is you as an individual, whether it is your direct family unit, or you have crowdsourced among extended family. It's a conversation that you need to have about what's going to be that tipping point. Lev, anything you want to add?
So first, let me just, in terms of value, I think that's the first thing I would want to strike, and or values. Sorry, Michael, I'll start there. Values, because why should they be getting grades, and who the hell are these people to evaluate me? I hate to tell them this, but that's how the world works. For now, maybe it'll be different, but for now, that's how it is. And everyone wants a little piece of paper with some grades out there that somehow helps an employer predict that you have certain skills that you can apply in your future place of work. I don't know what the future of work holds, as Joe, I think, was about to jump in. But for now, that's kind of how it works. So that's the values proposition. In terms of value, what I'm most proud of is if you're a New York State resident, my program is free of charge. You get 4 years of tuition, 2 years of free dorming, personalized advising, and you're in the greatest place on earth. Right now it's on the ropes, but it still is the greatest place on earth. But if you're from out of state, and we're seeing more and more students, Hillary, I'm sorry, applying from Texas, Maryland, Virginia, and all of a sudden we have a pocket of excellence from North Carolina. They're willing to pay our out-of-state rate of $18,000 a year and still get the free housing and the other parts, because that is the value proposition to them, because our out-of-state rate is lower than their in-state rate. And that is the reality that a lot of places are facing and people are facing. And so I am very proud to work for a state and a city system that actually liberates people into the middle class and above by not tying you down with exorbitant amount of student debt. So our value and values, I think, are very much aligned, is that if you're going from the very bottom, fresh off the boat, we'll get you into the middle class. If you're coming in the middle class, we will help propel you to the very top. And we will do so without chopping off a pound of your flesh. So I'm very proud of them. In terms of fit, again, do you want me to do a Trump impersonation? I wasn't quite sure, Joe, what's going on with the hand there. But I'm very proud that in New York, you will find a home. And I'm always reminded of the words of Robert Caro, who's a proud New Yorker, in case you haven't noticed. I'm one of those two, where people, when you think about culture, you think of Paris. When you think about finance, you think of London. When you think about home, you think of New York. we will have a home for anybody and everybody who is desiring to make a home here. So we will have an institutional fit, a neighborhood fit, and there is no person too weird to make a home in our city.
I want to jump on that. Yeah, I want to jump on that fit question really fast, just because I think that's something that I remember overlooking a lot when I was looking at colleges. Was, you can do a quick tour of the college and say, that was beautiful, but I don't feel that really gives you a better view of the culture within the institution and the community that surrounds it. And I think, especially in the heart of New York City, that community that surrounds the college that it's immersed in, that all has a big impact on your college experience. So, Hillary, especially since you're in charge of the tour guide team there, how would you say, okay, if I'm going to come take a look at the college, I want to go beyond just a tour. How do I actually kind of, get that feel for what being there and living there for years would be like?
Yeah, and I think that's something that I was going to just jump off of led the way that you talked about the neighborhood fit. That is such an important critical piece too, because I remember when I did my college search process, we looked all over the country, and my dad looked at me and he said, no matter what, you need to think about the city that you're about to move to, because most college graduates get their first job in the city that their college is in. And that opened my eyes, because I was looking at a lot of rural institutions, phenomenal private liberal arts schools, but that were isolated and in big, small, they were in tiny towns, and the next closest town was 4 hours away. And that really shifted my perspective. And again, everybody's journey of what they want is going to differ, but that's how I actually went to Trinity. And so that's how I wound up in San Antonio, is because San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the United States. It feels like a big, small town. It is super duper spread out, but with that comes so much diversity. Like Lev is talking about in New York City, there are all these different walks of life and cultures. But what I love about San Antonio is that it does not feel like, when I think of big cities in Texas, I think of Dallas and Houston. And I think of those two places because of the 1.5 million cars and all of the lanes of traffic on the highway. And those really stress me out. I love being in a big city and everything that comes to offer with the culture, the arts, the history, the opportunities, the Fortune 500 companies, the sports teams, all of those things. But I don't want to sit in traffic for an hour of my day. And I don't want to be crowded by people. And so I think San Antonio really, for me as an individual, married those two experiences beautifully. And so when thinking about how to get that feel of getting off campus and experiencing it, most of the time when you take a tour, it's going to be with a current student on a college campus. So asking them very candid questions about, what do you like to do for fun? And oftentimes that is a high schooler's way of coding, like, are there parties? Will I find alcohol? And let's just throw it out right now. If you were determined to find alcohol in college, you will find it. Regardless of the size, the type, the quality of the institution, there are parties at every college you go to. So you don't need to code that question. But if that is something that you're looking for in your college experience, asking those questions candidly of the current student tour guide of, how do you have fun? What is there to do off campus? How do you get off campus? So this is where Texas and New York differ greatly. In Texas, you kind of have to have a car. It is a very, very big place. And so while we have public bus systems, we have Lyft and Uber, we have rental cars on campus, and a good number of our students have cars. And so if you as an individual don't have a car, the likelihood of your roommate or a friend having a car on campus is high. It still doesn't change the fact that you will still likely need a car to get to XYZ place. Whereas in New York, you can hop on the subway, you can hop on the metro, you could walk and be totally fine. So again, it's thinking about, I know, shocker, it's thinking about those opportunities and what you want.
Now do a Trump impression.
But with that, finding the opportunities to get to know the surrounding neighborhood if you have the opportunity to visit a campus in person, spending some extra time to see what there is to do immediately off campus. Where's the coffee shop that everybody goes to study? If you enjoy museums, I love museums. Where's the closest museum? How are you going to get there? Is it free admittance to college students, or are you going to have to pay? So thinking about some of those pieces of the puzzle. And then I just can't say it enough, but talk to current students. They are so authentic and brutally honest about what they love about their school and also what they don't love. And I think that is one of the things that we as institutions, and Lev, correct me if I'm wrong, but no institution is perfect. And we are not the gold standard. No one is the gold standard. We are all constantly growing and improving and changing. And our students are really the driving force behind that, of making us better and helping us and holding us accountable to be a more inclusive and supportive place for students now and in the future. And so talk to current students. They will be brutally honest about what they've liked, what they haven't liked, and if they think what you want to do would work well here.
Hillary's done a fantastic, fantastic job. Great job. Only the best people.
Oh, man, that's why you said that.
That was pretty good.
Awesome. Wow. Okay,
hey,
sorry, I didn't
on-demand
know.
entertainment.
Yeah.
But realistically, Hillary is spot on. It is what's the culture of the place. And shocker, I don't have a driver's license. So you don't need it. It's just useless. And if you do have a car in New York, you're just an idiot. Just use the bikes, use your scooters.
It probably costs more to store it, doesn't it, than to like fill up on gas. Yeah.
The average price of a parking spot in New York is about $800 a month in a horrible neighborhood. So don't do it. You're a student, you're a kid, live a little, walk, interact with people. Like the whole point of, social behavior is to socialize. I know it's also a weird concept. Don't give me any ideas, Joe. I know that look. But the important thing is, and look, if you like noise, if you like people, if you want to be in a place that has a first class from 7 a.m. and the last one at midnight, yes, you're in a tall building. Yes, you're right in the heart of Midtown. No, you don't have a bucolic campus. But guess what? Central Park is 2 blocks away. Metropolitan Museum is 7 blocks away. The Opera is across the park, and you can go there for $20. You want to go see a Dominican neighborhood, an Ethiopian neighborhood. You want to have a Hispanic dude make you a great Jewish bagel. You can go anywhere you want, try anything you want, see things you never even thought existed. That's New York. I mean, and that's our campus. That's CUNY. And it's an incredible, and look, I went to City College. It's the oldest public institution of higher education in the United States. We started this shit show and we've evolved with it. So for goodness sake, you need to find that fit. Yes, but don't seclude yourself in a monastic type setting in the middle of nowhere. You need experience. You need to get your foot in the door, because most importantly, I did internships when I was in high school because my mother is a goddamn force of nature. And so I realized I was good at math. So I tried finance, like, every immigrant Jew in New York City. I hated it. I tried, I shadowed a dentist. Dear God, did I hate that. I mean, making people numb was kind of interesting. The rest of it was just awful. And medicine, I could hardly put up with healthy people. Imagine if they're sick. So of course I went into sciences. Only the best
Okay. I need to say something now, Dr. Lev. I have a point I'd like to make.
Hillary's right. So
And then Justin's got the slot after me. He's got another question he wants to ask. But after your stump speech about how everybody should go to the school that you're at, I thought I'd have to rain on your parade a little bit so that your students don't feel too good about themselves. So I'm a graduate from Iowa State University.
I'm from North Dakota.
Just like corn and soybeans all over the place.
But I lived in Tokyo for 4 years, and big cities are awesome. So just, you can
take
enjoy
that,
both.
So wait.
Take
Not
your
done,
lightsaber.
not done. So while I was at Iowa State University, I visited churches, synagogue, mosques, temples. My wife's from China. She came in as a PhD student. Most of my friends were either from India, Pakistan, or China, or some other foreign country. And the other thing that I think is changing, so I'll mention this. So just a quick bit about Weequal Group. So we went from 1 employee to 22 in 6 months. And most of them, I'd say about 70% of them, are from outside the country. Our chief of technology is Mboya Michael. He lives in Kenya. two gentlemen that are brothers, Vichy and Rashal Dariani. They are the chief of strategies and chief of operations of Weequal Group. They live in Panama. My daughters in their virtual school spans over 20 countries now, and people all over the world. But all they know is for the past 18 months, when they're going to school, they just log into their computer, and they're really good friends with a family in Florida, the Smiths. In the past 2 times we went on vacation, I asked them where they wanted to go, and they said that they wanted to drive down to see the Smith family because they have real relationships with them. So as great as it is to be in a beautiful city like New York, and I love New York. I've been in New York many times. I travel around to all
You
the
have lots of friends in New York.
when I was working for the FDIC as liaison to the BIS, but there's something about the world that's changed. It's really, really important. So Corinne Lay, who she's like this big time YouTuber. I had no idea that she was this big time YouTuber. Amazing woman. Corinne Lay is doing our green demo day at Weequal School. She also, but she even though she's this big time YouTuber, she decided during the pandemic to get her law degree. So she's getting her law degree, and she's not doing it in New York, in physically there. She's doing it virtually. And she's connecting people all around the world around her ideas. And so there's definitely something to local, because as soon as the public schools open back up, my daughters, something changed, because all of a sudden the house got really quiet. They were all coming to our house. We were the hub. Virginia. Nobody comes to Falls Church, Virginia, though, to homeschool. So as soon as the public schools open back up, then all of a sudden they're like, where'd everybody go? And so there is something too local, but I had to push back against you a little bit and talk up my thing since you did it. So.
Listen, your thing's great, and let me just point out, Iowa, University of Iowa, I think was the proud
Iowa State University.
All right,
other one's totally different. Actually, they're basically the same. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned,
the same, but
it's Iowans that I love. Yeah.
I believe President Xi attended it, so which is why it's like a great destination for the upper class of the Communist Party of China to Iowa. So congratulations.
I don't know if I should be happy about that.
Hey, call your Office of Alumni Relations to bring world peace.
All right, Justin.
No, I guess since we're talking about the international thing, that was my question. Was like, since the world is getting a lot smaller through the use of technology, and there are a lot of students from all over the world that want to come to the U.S. Some that are members that said, hey, can you just ask a specific question about how do you deal with international students? Especially international homeschool students, who is completely different. What kind of things might you be looking for different from them as opposed to everybody else?
Well, I think with international, there comes a lot of definitions within that. And so I think for most institutions in the United States, citizenship status plays a big role because in private institutions versus public institutions, again, are going to look very different. But for us at Trinity, your citizenship status, if you do not hold a green card or a permanent resident, if you are a foreign national or a true international student, you are read as an international student. So even if you are homeschooled, you would work directly with our international team because in looking at those students, one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle for an international applicant coming to the United States is ability to pay. And so, Lev, you kind of mentioned to that in terms of upper middle class and upper class. And so it is not uncommon for students abroad to apply to the institution. But one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle then for an international applicant is how much can your family contribute to your education? Because federal funding will not subsidize your education. Institutional funding can only go so far. And so if you have the ability to, say total cost of attendance, like Lev said, is $20,000. If you have the ability to contribute $1,500 US dollars to your education, then it becomes the whole business model of, well, are we able to support you to that metric and then run out our budget for the rest of the international applicants or vice versa? And so it really varies from institution to institution, but I think that's the biggest piece of the puzzle, in addition to all of those other layers that we talked about specifically for homeschooling, in terms of I cannot speak all of the languages. And so English language proficiency is going to be really critical and key depending on the institutions you apply to. And so as the admissions counselor working with you, you need to make sure that your documents are in English and that we can decipher and understand what they are saying, or if they are not in English, getting them translated by a reputable source so that we can then understand them. And then the other piece of that puzzle too is, as an international applicant, every institution is going to be different. But at Trinity, all of our classes are taught in English. And so we need to understand your English language proficiency through either SAT, ACT, Duolingo, IELTS, TOEFL, some sort of metric to help us understand, will you be able to do, not just do the work, but understand it in English as well. So, I mean, Lev, anything else that you'd add there?
No, I think you're absolutely right with respect to the TOEFL. That's what we accept at City University. And I would also highly recommend, if you can, get the GED. For us, it simplifies the question of, do you speak the language and can you apply it across various disciplines effectively and efficiently? So the TOEFL GED combo would be a winning combination if you're applying from abroad.
Is the GED necessary for homeschool students in the US? Does that add anything to their application? Or
I generally recommend it for a non-state certified homeschooling curricula. If you're doing a state certified school curriculum, the GED is not required because there is an assessment component that is in line with what the State Board of Regents expects. If you are doing an independent homeschooling curriculum, then a GED is highly recommended.
All right, and I could ask questions until tomorrow, but it's well after the time that I promised you guys we would sign off. I will give you the opportunity if either of you have any last comments you wanted to add, or just tell people how to get more information about your university.
Well, I would like to actually. I have one last quick question. If maybe if you could work it into your parting comments. So a question. So my daughter does a lot of interviews. She's interviewed. Actually, she interviewed Michael and Justin, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things that she asks with this is, what's a point of view that you have that most people disagree with, like a high conviction view? And I'd like to actually tailor that a little bit to this. So you're talking to homeschoolers, and a lot of the things that you're saying, they probably already knew. So if you're going to add the most value to other people, like that's the thing that we want our kids to know how to do. We know that's true, even though for a second we're worried we didn't understand the future, right? We know that they need to add value to other people forever. So one way you can add value to homeschoolers is to think of something that they're just not getting, that you know, and that's critical. And even if it's controversial, that's fine. There's no issue there. Just be really honest. Inquiring minds.
All right, Hillary, I'll fall on the sword for both of us on this one. First of all, if anybody's got any follow-up questions, by all means, feel free to email me on my office email that is ls626@hunter.cuny.edu. I'd be more than happy to follow up. In terms of a controversial view, I don't even know why this is controversial, but maybe for a variety of reasons, but I still believe in the supremacy of the West. And if my life is any testament to how things could work out for a kid who got to this country at the age of 10, and sort of am now finding myself in upper middle management of a major American university, it's a pretty incredible jump. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a rules-based society, a law-based society, and for a city that believed in investing in its newest citizens and providing pathways to an unexpected career of choice. But certainly it propelled me into public service of the best kind, with no student debt. And yes, New York is not cheap, but am I privileged and blessed to lead a great institution, a great young institution, be in charge of an army of nerds who are going to make a difference. And certainly I wouldn't be here if America wasn't here, and I wouldn't be here if public institutions didn't exist. So I still believe in the West, and despite all the folks out there doubting our future, I think we have staying power.
And similarly to Lev, if anybody has follow-up questions, definitely you can feel free to email me. My email is heverts, so you can see in the bottom of my screen, first initial, last name @trinity.edu. And in terms of a controversial opinion, I think with regards, it's not going to be quite as poetic as Lev's.
So it doesn't have to be controversial. I didn't use the word controversial. I said that it's something that most people may well, I said disagree with, but it could also be, so it could be me. All right, Lev is giving me the look. You want me to do a Trump impression?
Fake news media spreading lies. Texas, only the best people, and Hillary's done a great job. Okay, Jeff? Little hands.
Oh,
all right,
gosh.
all right. Wow.
Y'all are too funny.
What I meant was like, what's something that homeschoolers don't know that you know? Like something that what's missing in terms of that Venn diagram of, like, if you have a better understanding of truth when it comes to how to help kids get into homeschool, and then there's what most people think, what's different, right? What do you have in yours that's not in their head?
I think for homeschooling students, oftentimes the assumption will be that they are insular. They don't have a whole lot of interaction with outside populations and communities. And every single homeschool student that I have almost everyone has counteracted that, right? And proven me wrong based off of my assumptions, based off of what society has defined homeschooling to mean. But what I think could be missing from a homeschool experience that is so incredibly valuable is conflict with peers, with a grain of salt, right? Because your life is set up to connect and intersect with people from so many different walks of life, experiences, perspectives, identities that they hold. Just like Lev was saying about why New York is so great, because it truly is that melting pot of all of those experiences. But in a homeschool perspective, any opportunity that you can have to connect with your like-aged peers and experience some sort of conflict, not in a bad way, but maybe you want to throw a party and there's a disagreement about the theme or how we're going to decorate it or whatever it may be. It could be trivial, it could be big, but getting involved in ways so that you can learn how to navigate disagreement in a productive and respectful and kind way and empathetic way, I think is really, really valuable. And it will help you leaps and bounds when you get to a college environment that might be more traditional in terms of the learning style, because regardless of where you go, you will likely have at least one group project in your time in college. And guess what? If you work for a company or an organization, that's basically everything is a group project. So having those opportunities to learn interdisciplinary, interpersonal communication skills and working with people with different personalities and what it means to be a leader, I think that's one piece that could be missing from a homeschool experience. And so encouraging you to find ways and opportunities, whether it's through volunteering or joining a club and organization or a club athletic team, whatever way that you do that so that you can grow in those experiences is going to be really, really helpful, not just in the admissions process, but in life.
Wow. Yeah. Dr. Lev is applauding. I'm applauding. I'm gonna close this out, the live stream here shortly, but please stick around for a little bit. I'm blown away, especially by the two of you together. I was writing this in the chat. I don't know if you guys saw the chat. It was only Justin and Michael that were writing back. We were talking about you, but like, wow, man, I love you guys should start a podcast. That's what I was saying. And the thing, I was like, you just the two of you, But wow, thank you for coming on. I learned a lot. And this is extremely enjoyable too. Wow, this is fun. So thank you very much for coming on here. So just so you know, the links to everything that they want you to see, just send it to our team. We will take whatever you want and put it in that description. So you have carte blanche. If you want to be, you know, talking about your latest book, whatever it is, just send it over and we're going to do it. We're going to share this thing all over the metaverse. We say metaverse now, not internet, just so you're clear. So thank you. Don't go yet. I'm just going to end the live stream. Wow, this is so great. Okay. Now the end of the live stream is going to be me